Hey guys, how's it going? I'm DudeNotSoHD, and today I'm going to be talking about why nerfs are bad for video games. So let me start off by saying that not all nerfs are bad for games, and not all games have this issue. However, there are certain scenarios where you see certain developers start to sort of use this as their go-to fix for any problem in the game. And this is when we start to run into issues where it actually starts to hurt the game you're playing and it's not nearly as enjoyable as it was before. Instead of maybe looking at buffs elsewhere or fixing certain things elsewhere in the game, maybe quality of life changes within the game itself, they go straight to nerfing the problem, which is sometimes I feel like counterintuitive, and then we end up with a little bit of a shit version of the game we're currently playing. So in this video I'm going to go through a few reasons why developers might nerf something and why I don't think that these reasons actually work, and give a few examples of these scenarios to show you why this is a problem. So the first one is nerfing because things might get out of hand. So this first one is pretty bad because this nerf is usually done preemptively and without much information or time for the player base to test the game and decide whether this is even bad or enjoyable. So this nerf actually doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it always leaves a lot of people feeling puzzled, because this can even happen when there's an overwhelming amount of positive feedback from the players to the developers. So you'll see in the background I'm playing Cold War Zombies. Now in the Zombies there's a strat to go for high rounds where you use the Ring of Fire because it gives your weapons that much more damage while you're standing in it. But you can also upgrade the Ring of Fire that allows when you're shooting the zombies, for it to take from your ammo reserves instead of the clip of your weapon. Now this is a very good strat, and most people using this strat could see from a mile away that Treyarch was going to nerf it, even though the whole community was crying out saying, please don't nerf this because we are having a ton of fun. There's a lot of positive feedback about this new Zombies because the gameplay just feels so much better. The way they've created this game mode this time around just feels a little bit better than it has been for some while. So what does Treyarch do? They nerf it anyway. Now granted, it's not the biggest nerf and you can still use this strat. The only thing they really changed is the ray gun and the way it works with the Ring of Fire. However, why do this in the first place? People are actually enjoying the game, so why go ahead and nerf it anyway, just in case things might get out of hand, just in case it might be too easy for some people to be able to do this. Are we forgetting that Zombies is not a competitive game mode? I mean, yes, at the very top, people are competing for world records and all sorts of things like that. However, at its core, Zombies is not a competitive game mode. So who are we protecting here with this nerf? So this doesn't inspire a lot of confidence for future DLC because they might end up nerfing something else or another strategy that people are enjoying using. And you just end up feeling like you can't have too much fun, otherwise it'll be taken away from you. So this next one is nerfing for the sake of balance. So this one here is probably the most common type of nerf and usually goes with competitive type of video games. And so in those scenarios, most of the time, it's a good idea to do so. Although you can also argue that buffing things that aren't as strong might be a better move than just nerfing the problem. And I think this is the biggest issue when it comes to these types of nerf. Because in the end of the day, it's easier to nerf one thing then buff a bunch of others. So it ends up becoming the lazy and easy fix. But that's in competitive video games. There are many types of other games where this type of nerfing mentality is present, even when there isn't really a reason for anything to have balance. And in that case, you're just taking away from the fun and core of the game that we are playing. So my biggest example of this, and probably biggest frustration in when this has happened, is the jump from Destiny 1 to Destiny 2. So by the end of the first Destiny's life cycle, it actually ended up being a pretty decent game. I know it started off rough, but as they started to add to the game and the DLC that was added later on, it actually started to look like they were building towards something. And this was a power fantasy looter shooter I do believe had some issues and did sort of to me feel like a waste of potential. But as it was going, it started to feel like it was getting closer and closer to that potential. So a lot of the people who played Destiny, including me, were very hyped about Destiny 2, and we were wondering what they were going to build upon. And there were certain leaks or teasers that sort of showed that there was definitely something they were working on. But when it came out, man, was it such a big disappointment. Where I believe that Destiny 2's starting point was actually worse than Destiny 1. And yes, Destiny 2 had a better story, it had more things in it. However, they removed some of the core mechanics in the game that really made it not feel like a power fantasy any longer. Mobility was nerfed, how quickly you gained your supers was nerfed, and they added this new weapon system that was supposedly supposed to be better, but you could smell balance all over it. I mean, they even first showed it off in a PvP game, where the PvP was also no longer 6v6, it was 4v4. It felt like they were trying to go for an esport game, even though this game is mainly known for its PvE. I mean, it's a looter shooter, MMO, RPG, open world type game. I mean, I wouldn't call it an MMO, it's not, but you know, that's the way they try to market it anyway. So this new gun system made it so that snipers and shotguns were no longer part of your secondary slot. They were moved to your third slot, which was usually for big, powerful weapons like grenade launchers, rocket launchers, and heavy machine guns. So what that meant is that you actually had two primaries, one in your first slot and one in your second, and the only difference with those two was that the secondary would usually have a burn to it. Now I say burn, but let me be clear here, burns do shit all. Other than if you shoot purple shield with purple bullets, it goes down faster. That is literally it. Nothing like if you shoot them with solar or fire damage that they burn. No, that does nothing. It actually does nothing but take certain shields off faster. So suddenly we're all sort of feeling perplexed as to why we just don't feel as powerful as we used to, because you used to be able to have a primary, a sniper, and a rocket launcher where you could deal a lot of damage. Instead now you had two primaries and you had to select the third. And not only that, but the exotics that were available in Destiny 2 were nothing compared to the exotics in Destiny 1. There just wasn't any wow factor anymore. There was nothing making you feel powerful anymore, which is kind of a problem when you're playing a power fantasy game. So this whole philosophy seemed to stem from the idea of making PvP as balanced as possible. And I know that sounds insane, but you would be surprised how many times Destiny nerfed certain weapons just because they were broken in PvP. Now let me just repeat what I said before. This game is mainly a PvE looter shooter, not a PvP shooter, yet their balance theory was all about making PvP more balanced. It doesn't make any fucking sense, and it used to drive me up the wall. And yes, they've made many changes to the game and it's much better now, but it took a good year for it to even become remotely like Destiny 1. And so we have to go on this roller coaster ride again, where we wait for the game to get better when they finally fix it, just like we did in Destiny 1. However, they already made this game once, so why didn't they add to it? All for the sake of balance in a PvE looter shooter. So you can see what I mean when I say that this type of nerfing makes zero sense in certain type of video games. So the final one is nerfing because of backlash. So I'm going to try and make this one a little bit shorter because Destiny always gets me to go on huge rants and I've gone on for a little too long as it is. So when I say nerfing because of backlash, what I mean is that sometimes developers will start nerfing things because they get a lot of backlash from certain things within the game. And that makes a lot of sense. If people don't like something and want it to be nerfed, then it makes sense to nerf it. However, I feel like sometimes this can seep into the development mentality and start to change the way the development team develops future patches and sort of items that they add to the game. And so you actually end up with a bit of a nerfed development mentality. And the biggest example I can give of this one is Fortnite. Now, Fortnite could have also gone into the previous category, but I think it deserves a spot right here. And of course, while I'm recording this, Season 5 just dropped and it's starting to look like a bit of a return to form. However, there were a bunch of seasons after Season 10 that I feel were lacking in the way they were releasing certain items and the way they went about that. So everyone knows at this point that Chapter 2 has not been very good, especially comparing to Chapter 1. But if we look at the last season of Chapter 1, we remember Season 10, the mechs, and the outcry from the community of how broken these things were. And I agree, they were broken and they should either have been nerfed or completely removed. And we had certain things like this previously, like planes, ballers, the sword, all sorts of things like that. However, I would say that those things weren't that bad. They were bad for competitive, and most of the complaining was coming from competitive, which makes sense. On the competitive side of things, if you're going to run a competitive side of your game, then you should make sure that that is balanced properly. However, if you have a casual side of your game, then that should not touch the casual side at all. That should not be a thing. However, it seems that it has turned into that, and I can give a few examples. So the biggest examples I can give is the charged shotgun and the cars. So here's a weapon that Epic wants to release with a high amount of damage, higher than the pump even, but they had to make drawbacks for it to make sure that it was balanced. And those drawbacks were that you had to charge the weapon and release to shoot it, as well as there was decal ammo in it. Now this isn't the worst example because it actually turned out to be a pretty decent weapon and it made a lot of sense, but it also seemed to slow down the way people were playing the game because it was probably for a while the strongest shotgun in the game, because they even nerfed the tac shotgun so people would use the charge more. But that one was a pass. The cars, however, really show this nerfed mentality. So if you look at previous land vehicles, you'll note that they were basically released just the way Epic wanted them. There was no penalties to using these type of vehicles, and they were all quite insane. But fast forward, however long it was, and in comes the cars. Now, everyone was pretty excited for these cars, although by the time they released, no one cared because it took so long. But anyway, they release and you start to realize that they have some serious drawbacks. One of them being that you can't drive fast on anything other than a road, and your vehicle needs fuel, so you can't drive forever, which has never been a thing in Fortnite. And the only reason you can assume that they've done this is because they were too afraid to release it too broken because of the backlash that they might receive. And it's not just the cars, it's not just the charged shotgun, it's many things. Just look at the amount of things they are releasing in general. Nothing is really getting added like they used to, and you don't really feel that go big or go home mentality anymore, just in case they might ruin the competitive side of their video game. Which doesn't make sense because they still remove certain things from the competitive side of the game anyway. So why are they so worried to release certain things broken if they can just remove that in the competitive side of Fortnite anyway? So it's like they've forgotten what made this game good in the first place. Yes, I know there was a lot of broken shit in the game at one point, and a lot of people were annoyed by it, especially on the competitive side of things. However, these were also the things that got casuals to play the game and a lot of people to play the game, because there was nothing better than you and your friends jumping to the game and testing all the broken shit. It was always a good time, and it wasn't just broken stuff, it was the quirky and cool shit too that also just seemed to go, and they aren't really releasing any cool shit like that anymore. It just seems like there's a huge emphasis on trying not to piss people off. So we're left with such a boring version of what this game used to be, and it feels empty and not nearly as fun. So even if Season 5 is a return to form, that mentality previously should never have been a thing, because it created a lull in the game that people will always remember, just for you to finally snap out of it and realize that it's probably hurting the game. So in conclusion, nerfs aren't always a bad thing, but I feel like there's definitely some type of games and some type of scenarios where it does nothing but hurt the game and hurt the community that love the game. So if you guys did enjoy the video, please drop it a like and subscribe if you feel so inclined.